Hello, my name is Braden, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down my Cubase 12 template for composing music for film. The purpose of this video is to contribute to the online community of composers and sort of give back in a way and reciprocate the resources that I've gotten and the tips that I've gotten from watching videos similar to this. Many other composers have done template walkthroughs and breakdowns, and that's been really invaluable to me in putting together mine as it's evolved over the years. And so I thought I would contribute back and also be in kind of displaying my template and breaking it down. It provides the opportunity for people to kind of evaluate what I'm doing and potentially point out to me if there are areas of growth where I can improve, maybe some things that I haven't noticed that others can point out that'll improve the template, make it more effective and efficient. So feel free, this is an open invitation to critique or advise or give tips if you see anything that kind of stands out that could use improvement. But yeah, and who is this video for? It's for people like myself who are, interested in producing music and writing music professionally, but also, you know what, if it's just your hobby and you enjoy doing it on the side or part-time, it can be applicable to you as well. Producers, composers, whatever. I personally compose for film, and that's mainly my kind of area that I pursue, although I do other things as well. Composers or audio engineers, anybody in that kind of field can hopefully watch this and get some kind of useful information from it. Anyway, so in case you haven't noticed, I am not scripting this video. I'm kind of going off the cuff. I will try to be concise and just run through it, and not bloviate. So, okay, here we go. I'm going to start at the top here, and you can kind of, Cubase users will be familiar with the windows and the, toolbars and everything going on there. You can kind of just look and evaluate what tools I have. I won't go into too much detail. I guess I'll briefly say I have two modes of time format available here. One is my main one that I use most when I'm writing is obviously, bars, but I also have time code available, and Cubase has this feature where if you enable two different time formats and then you press Alt and then click on your primary one, you can switch between the two. Because often if I'm importing things and I'm working with picture, which is time coded, I will need to, maybe I want to import other cues to see how they relate to the one I'm currently working on. And I, know where those are supposed to go by the time code. So I will alt click and go back and forth between these. And that'll relate to other Cubase templates I have in terms of reviewing things I'm scoring. And maybe I'll do breakdowns of those at another time. But anyway, that's a particularly useful thing for me. So let's go at the top here and we'll just kind of start at the top and work our way down, so to speak. So in the main composition window, the first thing I have is a timecode readout. I like to just kind of have this to glance at. And so if you press Shift S in Cubase 12, that'll take you to your project setup. Or at least, I don't know if that's a default key command or if I installed that myself, but, project setup window. When I import, and we'll get down to this in a sec, but when I import video, if I'm scoring something, I will obviously align what is, the time code of the video with the very, beginning of the cue that I'm working on for that particular scene. So I will, go in here, and if it's not, if this is not the default time code that the video is at, then I will adjust it to match the video and then click get frame rate from video so that project frame rate matches, and then everything will line up in terms of times. And when I get back to when I submit music for review, everybody knows exactly where the music is supposed to begin according to the time code because it's very precise. But anyway, so I like to kind of have this as at a glance, just to just sort of see, and also, zoom out and evaluate, okay, how long is this cue, roughly speaking, just to kind of wrap my head around it. So that's what that's for. Tempo is pretty self-explanatory. Your tempo track is, you're able to manipulate that and do multiple tempos in a session. Signature, another thing, pretty self-explanatory, your time signature, whatever signature you're writing in. Export markers. So let's talk about these. So when I am scoring a scene, I will have 5 bars of headroom. I kind of, it defaults to 5 bars of headroom at 4/4 time signature, but sometimes if if I switch the time signature right now, for example, to 3/4, it kind of goes all the way until 6, just past then. And this is a cycle marker, which are different from, I guess, non-cycle marker or position markers. I'll kind of go into that later, potentially. I'll go into that here in just a sec, the difference of what you'll use those for. But anyway, so it'll change depending on the time signature, but roughly speaking, I'll have this amount of headroom, a decent amount anyway. And the reason for that is just if I want to export video right out of this, session, let's say I'm working on a scene and I just want to export this one scene for feedback. I have another template where maybe I can import everything I've been working on that I've exported from individual sessions, and I can combine scenes to send those, or I can just send the whole film if I want to, depending on, what the situation is. But if I just want to send the one scene, I want to be able to send it with headroom. And the headroom is just useful because you don't want the scene to kind of start and just the music start immediately. That'd be kind of jarring for the director, producer, whoever is going to be reviewing it. You want to put yourself in their head and think what would be best for you. If you were in their position, what would be most helpful for you in reviewing something? And it's nice to kind of have, however long this is. How long is this? It's 6-7 seconds. Just to kind of get into the scene, establish, okay, here's where we are and here's the tone, and then have the music be introduced. So I have the headroom, and then obviously I have an export marker here. It's green because that means go or, start or whatever. Whatever's easiest for you. And let me say real quick, I forgot to mention this up top. None of this is meant to be like you have to do this or you need to, kind of pick and choose. Whatever you think will be most helpful for you. The colors I've chosen, the layout, this is so far what I've kind of developed over years as like, this is most helpful and efficient for me. Whatever helps you do your job and write music most efficiently and effectively, then do that. And if that's something completely different in this video, then scrap it and say, who cares? Anyway, so the green start is what I kind of use to reference, okay, I need to, and the export, it's not always at bar 1 necessarily. Occasionally, if you're working on a session and stuff gets moved around and that just is, stuff happens and you end up moving this, then you want to look for this. You don't just want to always assume it's going to be at bar 1 because it might not be, right? Because shit happens. So that's where I will start my export when I'm exporting either audio or video or both for review. And then I have these cue markers here. Start and finish, you can kind of see the brackets. And those I just use to encompass like, where is the score? Where is the music? Whatever my contribution is, where does it start and end? And then the export, obviously, is where my end locator will go, where I'm going to, export to. This is everything that's going to be exported. And if you're wondering what the extra room here is beyond the music, well, that's for, reverb, delay, allowing the music to fade out naturally. It also has the added benefit of also kind of, giving the filmmaker a little preview of how the cue ends and what it feels like ending that scene and going into the next one after, with that score. But So what I will do, and I'll show a mixer window here in just a sec, but what I will do is before I'm getting ready to submit for feedback or, whatever, send to the people who are, hiring me to score whatever, I export and the cue ends, and then I wait for the fade out down here to finally, and it's picking up my voice right now, so you can see that. But whenever the audio activity finally fades out and there's absolutely nothing whatsoever, then that's my export point. And I kind of set that. And unless I augment that or change something in the cue, that's where it stays. So that's my export markers. Scene markers are, in a nutshell, just kind of for, like things in terms of the arrangement or the composition that I want to keep in mind as I'm writing. So if, I'm scoring and there's a particular point where the dynamics need to increase, or, a director or producer has informed me that there's a particular moment where they want me to accent something or, enhance something or whatever, I may put in a scene marker there, and in the description up here, give myself some kind of note, and then I have that there, and I can remember that, visually, and just keep that in mind as I'm putting the arrangement together. So that's what that is. I'll say something real quick about, I guess I blew past this in the export, but so the cycle markers are useful if you have, I'll say briefly, sometimes I work on production music, for libraries or licensing or something like that. And let's say you have a full version of, like, let's say you produce some trailer music and you have a full version. You also have some stemmed versions, or you have some, a minute-long version, a 30-second version. You have, different kind of versions in terms of time. What you can do is you can select everything, and in Cubase, if this trick I've learned here, if I I'll click on my start export, control click on my end export, and I guess I should change this because I won't do anything. So control click on both of those and press P. It'll highlight everything, and automatically sets my locator range to my in and out points. And then you can click add cycle marker after you've done your locator range, and then let's say that's the full version. You can select that as the full version, and then you have a minute-long version over here or whatever. You can add another cycle marker and call that whatever you want, and there you go. And then when you go to export, you can click on cycle markers, and that's weird. Those should be there. Is it because I haven't? Export range. Huh. Activate this track. There you go. Okay. You have to have it activated. So we learned something together. Very cool. Okay. Anyway, moving along. So this is where I will import my project assets for the film that I'm working on, the scene that I'm working on in particular. So whatever the title acronym is I'm using for the project, I will put that there, and then the date that I received those assets on, or the date that they have designated that edit as the most recent date, either one of those two, I will put that here. The C just stands for circa, so circa whatever the date is, and I will have that there so I can know that I'm working on the most updated cut of whatever I'm scoring. And then obviously video goes here, and I've different asset tracks for dialogue, temp music, and sound effects, should they have them. Sometimes they just have the one audio track, in which case, it'll just go in the first one below the video file. And I also have all of those feeding into a VCA track, which just kind of allows me to, if I want to, adjust the volume of all of those together at the same time. So when I have a scene I'm going to work on, I will import video. I will go, to my Finder and import whatever it is I'm going to be importing. And then I will most likely not import the audio with the video track. I will, if they've stemmed out other audio tracks to fill these, I will import those separately and then have those here. And then I will figure out where the scene starts, where the music starts. And basically what I'll do is I'll import everything, figure out where I'm supposed to start, on the time code, maybe it's over here. And then the tricky thing about having them all in a folder is that you can adjust the length just by the one folder track. You don't have to, you could just go like this and then highlight all the tracks, but I can just do that via the folder track if I want to, blow it up so it's nice and big or whatever. And then here you go. So I'll make it this length, and then obviously where I'm going to start writing the cue is bar 5, so I'll drag all that to bar 5. And then I will extend it to start, so that I have a couple bars of headroom at number 1, bar 1, and then I'll go back to bar 1, see what the time code is on my video window, because the time code will be burnt into the cut most likely. And then just like I said earlier, I'll go into project, set it accordingly, and then make sure that my time code readout down here matches what's on my video window, which is here. My video player window, it usually lives on my second monitor. And then you have that, and you're ready to go. So that's what's going on there. So this is all kind of like, technical stuff related to, the signature, tempo, all the things that are going on in the arrangement, and then all the assets as well. And then the markers to remember where to export properly, and also what's going on in the scene. So there you go. There's a lot of technical stuff there. Moving down, I have my instrument tracks, what are mostly instrument tracks. I have a couple of sampler tracks and audio tracks, but most of what I do is in the box at this point, like a lot of composers and producers. So I have multiple categories that I guess I just collapse here and give like a brief overview of different types of instrumentation, and then we'll get on to my group tracks later here in a sec. But so I have woodwinds, brass, orchestra, percussion, pianos, bells and harps, strings, choir, voices in general. I have one for room tone, which I'll get to, and then hybrid stuff like synthesizers, hybrid percussion, sound design, guitars. So basically I have, tried to put up here in concert order whatever you would get in like a, orchestral arrangement, and then the hybrid stuff. So I have them separated in roughly those two. And I have those in, let's say I'm working on a hybrid score and I'm going to do like an all synth score kind of a thing. It's useful having them in a folder because you can just, in theory, you could just get rid of this entire folder and get rid of, the tracks if you needed to. Cubase tends to crash when I do stuff like that. But you can just collapse it and not have to delete it. So there you go, problem solved there as well. It's saving right now because I have it set to autosave for every 10 minutes or whatever it is. Would definitely recommend setting up your sessions in Cubase to autosave. Oh, maybe it's not. Oh, there we go. I was kind of scared there for a sec. Maybe it's just overwhelmed by all these instrument tracks. Okay, so I won't spend too much time on these. I might do some more videos where I talk about, particular libraries. But this is all my woodwind stuff. And I kind of have, you'll see this in common with other libraries. I tend to have them stemmed out in terms of this is ensemble things, and then this is extras, various solo instruments maybe, or the things I've picked up. And then I'll try to group them as well in terms of whether they're effects tracks, if they're, loops or aleatoric, or, various different kind of samples that maybe don't fall into the meat and potatoes of ensemble, instrument sample libraries. I'll put those there. Solo stuff, and these are audio tracks in case I have, a soloist record some stuff and send it to me for a composition to replace some things I did with virtual instruments. I will import those here. You'll see that these are all disabled. I have all my instrument tracks automatically disabled in Cubase when I create a new session. And this just saves space. This just has worked for me, and I've seen other people do this. And I'll talk more about my technical system maybe another time as it currently is, and computer specs and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it saves space and saves processing power and makes things go faster. And if I want to, I can obviously just click a button. It'll take just a few seconds, and then my track loads up. And then my Cinewinds track is here, and I can begin to play to my heart's content, and then disable it if I decide I don't need it anymore or what have you. Brass, similar things. Solo, ensemble, effects, I'll tend to, group things the same way. And I'll tend to try to, but something I would recommend is having things in the same order within folder tracks. So like you can see, I have my ensembles first, and then extras, and then effects, big band type stuff. And then up here I have some solo brass stuff. So I have solo first, and then ensemble, and then effects. I tend to order things the same way. And that just, these little things that can add up to making you 2 seconds faster. Maybe it's only saving you a couple of seconds, but that compounds and adds up over, a longer period of time. And so whatever can make you faster, more efficient, that's something I've tried to do here with these band horns. Again, things are kind of in the same order. So there's that. Orchestral percussion. I have an orchestral percussion folder. I have drums, pianos. Well, are pianos? I know pianos are technically percussive instruments. In case some of you didn't know, technically it's a percussion instrument. But I have those as their own folder. I do have drum kits in here, and not in the hybrid section. And that's just because whatever, like sometimes drum kits can be used in orchestral arrangements. So there you go. Who cares, right? And maybe if I, want to, I can move it later. Like I said, whatever helps you work faster. But I have my orchestral percussion. I have it sorted by general, so that stands for percussion, melodic percussion. I have timpani here. I have the other, obviously there's other melodic instruments, but I have those in the pianos, bells, and harps category. So a lot of those have been put there. Woods, that's collapsed because I don't use it as much. I tend to kind of collapse, pre-collapse things that may be, like ethnic percussion. I'm not always working on ethnic sounding scores. If I am working on one, I can just, do a quick search, navigate to it, and open it very quickly. But I tend to have it collapsed just because, scrolling makes things faster. I'm not always using it, so that's why that is the way it is. Metals, miscellaneous. This is just exactly what it sounds like, miscellaneous. Again, I'll go into specific kind of, samples that, or, libraries, stuff, whatever. I'll do that in future videos. Drum kit stuff, I like drums, and I have lots of different, I don't tend to, I'll say this, I'll start, like Easy Drummer is one I really like. Battery from Native Instruments. These are some that I like to kind of go to and build up a kit with. I will typically duplicate tracks as I go. Let's say I do Easy Drummer and I have a, kick, snare, and hi-hat just to keep it simple kind of a thing going. Once I establish my arrangement and my composition, like whatever the drums are going to be doing on that one track, then I will duplicate those and then route them accordingly. And we'll get to the routing and the groups in a sec. But I like to be able to process, put plugins or specifically manipulate instruments independent of each other. Like the kick drum, I may want to do things totally different to the kick drum than I want to do the snare. So I will kind of build this up as I go. And that's a big part of the hybrid section as well, which I'll kind of explain once I get there. Pianos, bells, and harps is exactly what it sounds like. Acoustic pianos, keyboards, organs, I tend to have those here. Bells and mallets, harps, those are kind of a similar kind of instrument, and so those are grouped together. Strings is a little bit different. This is one of the few folders I have grouped in terms of libraries. So I don't have all my solo longs and shorts in just these. I have all my solo longs and shorts within the Cinesamples libraries in here. As you can see, I'll collapse that, and then I have a couple of 8dio string libraries, Cinematic Strings 2. I also have some effect stuff down here. So I tend to have those grouped that way. And I've known or learned after working with these libraries for a while, I tend to use Cinestrings as my bread and butter, but I like to augment or enhance certain, maybe it's the cello, or maybe it's another instrument group. I tend to know that I like to augment or enhance various parts of the orchestra with other libraries that kind of have a different sound or that works well for that section. So I will, or maybe, the shorts are better in one library. The longs is just like working with the libraries you have and kind of learning their strengths and weaknesses. So I will use these together very often. String effects. I'll say something about this. So the analog strings, let's open this guy up. This is an output library. There are some synthesizer and hybrid sounding instruments and samples in here, but it has if a library has a strong bent towards another, a lot of libraries are versatile and will come with lots of different sounds that maybe lend themselves well to synthesizers, but also lend themselves well to strings like this library does. Then I will duplicate that, and I don't just have one analog strings instance. As you'll see, I have one specifically for strings. At least I'm pretty sure I do. I have one specifically for strings, and then I'll have another one designated for synths. And I will usually label those as such. Like this one, Auras from Slate and Ash. Fantastic library, fantastic company. I have 2 out of their 3 products, and I desperately want their 3rd very soon. But this one has Auras has a bowed section of their instruments, and I tend to use it a lot. So if and this is like I'm saying, I don't do this for every library. I just do this because I tend to use a lot of these instruments and samples. And so in that case, I will have multiple instances of that and have one, because you want to avoid time wasted, right? Again, efficiency and effectiveness is what we're going for. So I don't want to just have the one instance because it's mainly a synthesizer library and then go looking for it every time I'm in my string section and going, where is it? Because I forgot that it mainly has synth stuff and I just didn't put it, so just make life easy on yourself, your future self. Do favors for your future self to save them time. And so that's something that's going on there. More string stuff, ethnic strings, blah, blah, blah. Choir stuff, I don't have a lot. But that's okay because I don't tend to do a lot of choral stuff. The room tone, I'll say something about this real quick. So the room tone is Cinesamples in their Cinestrings core. They have a room tone track that when you start playback, it'll start playing back room tone. It's very subtle and light. I don't even know if you can hear that. But anyway, so I have this track. I like to kind of imbue this into my orchestral arrangements. Sometimes I forget, and a lot of the libraries kind of have inherently a room tone to them anyway. But I kind of like it just as like a very subtle bed underneath everything if I'm doing an orchestral arrangement. And as we're about to get into later on in the group tracks, I route everything such that I'm able to stem it out separately. We'll get more into that, but basically to kind of preview that, I couldn't just route this to my master, because then if I wanted to stem things out, it may not make it. So what I do is I just have a send, and I send it to each of my master tracks that are orchestral. And I have 2 instances of it because I have more orchestral master stem tracks than I do, send, sends on this track, send bars. I don't know what you call it. You can see I have some low end and some top end rolled off. So there's that. That's what that is. Hybrid stuff. Let's talk about synthesizers. So here in the synthesizer area, I will have just kind of miscellaneous whatever. A lot of the time when I do synth scores or, hybrid stuff, electronics, I like to kind of go into my various libraries, and like Omnisphere has, thousands and thousands of samples and sounds. There's just no, I use that a lot. It has a huge library within this one instance. There are many different things and I like to go into these various libraries or, instruments, depending on what they are and depending on the project, and kind of pick and choose and build up a sort of template. And so I'll have lots of these, just kind of, they're not, organized down here like these are. There's a few that are organized, but mainly everything kind of starts off, without being in a category like lead synths or ambient synths. So I'll kind of just quickly preview what I'll do. So if I want to go into absynth and there's some sounds in here that I want, let's see, I will go to, browser, there we go, forget how to navigate this thing. If I like the 500-foot wide steel drum, that's doing it for me for that particular project. What I'll do is I will remain on this track. I'll click Shift D in Cubase, and that duplicates the track. And then you can see I can open this up, and there's my instance of that. And then I will rename 500-foot drum or whatever, and then I'll go back to here, continue to browse. And this kind of just allows me to, I have a dark place. I like that one. I'll duplicate that, name it. Maybe I will route these to a particular, I'm not going to use it as lead synth. I'm going to use it as a drone. So I'll send it to the drones. I'll kind of route them as I go. And then I'm sort of building up within, this template for the project that I'm working on, various different instruments that I can have at the ready and then activate if I think they work for a particular scene. So there you go. There's lots of these here. And then down here, these are different groups that correspond to different group tracks that I have for, synthesizer sounds. And so what I'll do is I will build this up, like I said, and then maybe the 500-foot drum works really well for, the bass synths. I will click and drag, and then now it'll be down here organized in my bass synths. I did this recently, and this has been a huge time saver, because previously I just had a giant list of synthesizers, instruments that were unorganized, and they were organized within synths, but they weren't organized more within that. And so I would be going like, where's my, what's the instrument that's the, bass instrument? It has like a weird name or something, like, a dark place. So that doesn't, you can write bass on there if you want to use it as bass, but it's just been easier for me to have these, folders to organize into and kind of, again, make life easier for yourself. So I've got different folders for lead synths, accompanying synths, ambient, drones, textures, ARPs, bass synths. That's roughly it. If I do any sort of audio recording or importing, I have these kind of automatically set up that I can drag and drop in here. Those are stereo tracks, that's what the ST stands for. And maybe I'll, duplicate if I need some more. But yeah, that's what's going on there. And I have lots of, as you can maybe notice, lead synths. Omnisphere has one. Omnisphere has pretty much its own, not drones for whatever reason, but, ARPs. Omnisphere tends to have its own I have multiple instances of Omnisphere in these just because I use Omnisphere a lot. And like I mentioned earlier, it's got a lot of different instruments within it. So it won't be, for some of these other libraries, I may not have any idea if I'm going to use some of their sounds in these particular areas. But Omnisphere, it pretty much has everything. So you can almost guarantee that if you needed a lead synth, it would have one. It has, a bunch of different things. So I have instances of those in each category. Hybrid percussion, same thing. There's kind of a miscellaneous list, and then I have them organized into high, mid, low, sub, ensemble, and audio. So I will do the same thing with the hybrid libraries that I'll do with the synthesizer libraries. Sound design. There's not a ton of sound design stuff, and so I tend to find it pretty manageable not to have like risers and whooshes, and I can't remember if I have those in because I have a template specifically for trailer music. Can't remember if I have that there, but it's pretty manageable right now. I'll make it if I need to later on as I go. But there's that, and then guitars. And I play guitar. It will perform a lot of parts on things sometimes, and so I have tracks automatically set up to where if I want to play electric guitar, I can activate the track and then go over to my mixer window. I have this automatically bypassed whatever amp simulator I'm using or effect simulators I'm using, like Guitar Rig 6, but I'll activate it and then I can go within it and then decide what kind of guitar sound I want to do. And again, it's routed to rhythm, but I also have a lead group if I want to, change the routing or whatever. You'll also notice I guess I'll mention this real quick. So I have a MIDI fader box that I'll use for, messing with volume. As you can see over here, I can, adjust volume over here to my left. I can also, so I have the, high cut and low cut filters automatically activated on all my tracks because I have those activated on my MIDI fader box as well. So you can see as I move a slider, that will correspond there. So that's kind of a nice thing. When I set that up, I activated all of these. And then I know when I activate a track, all I have to do is move a fader over here and I can automatically adjust that for any specific track. And so I've got, instrument tracks here and, audio tracks to be able to record for guitars. And then I've just got miscellaneous audio tracks down here in case I want to duplicate these or import anything, stereo and mono. So that's it for instruments. Let's move on to group tracks. And for this, I will go over to, let's look at this in this window here, and then I'll show you my mixer windows. Basically, again, kind of top to bottom, like little things at the top and then going down to like the bigger things, filtering down into the bigger things. I have individual groups and I have them grouped similarly and in the same order as my instrument tracks, again, to save time. And so I will know the order is the same. So, I will spend less time looking. And rarely do pretty much the only time I look at group tracks in this window is if I want to do some kind of volume automation, then I'll kind of adjust that here. And I'll say more about volume automation here in just a sec later on. But anyway, that's what I'll do for this. But as you can see, I have these organized into long articulations and short articulations for a lot of the orchestral stuff. So piccolo and flute, oboe, and English horn, etc. Low winds, long and short, all these kind of things. Ensemble, maybe there's some, ensemble patches that don't, separate things out into individual instruments within the woodwind section. Those will go here. So everything roughly has an individual group that it will go to. And sometimes it's like you see down here in the brass, the trumpets have their own group, piccolo and flute are in the same one. So as to the question of, should I just have like piccolo groups and then flute groups? Kind of depends on on your needs as a composer and producer, and how much control you want to have in manipulation over any specific thing. But this is roughly, to a point. I think there's things can get overkill and you can get over nitpicky when, how often am I really gonna need a piccolo group because I have to adjust them slightly, differently than. And if you want to, you can duplicate tracks and rename really quickly. And you can always augment and, change a particular instance if you need to, should the need arise. But roughly speaking, you want to have this whole template set up such that it'll cover, most of your needs, most of the things that you're going to do, or you're always going to have instruments. You're always going to want them routed a certain way. So why not just do it once and then have that set up? And then the one change will, duplicating these and separating these out would take a few, seconds, as opposed to building the whole thing up from scratch every time. So anyway, you get the idea. But so individual group tracks for the instrument groups, orchestral percussion, drum groups, kick, snare, toms. Like I said, I separate all those out and route them accordingly. So those all go there. Let me say something about, let's open these. Let's get to the mixer window now. So I will have in the mixer windows, which usually lives on my other screen, I'll bring those over. There are 4 in Cubase 12. This one I have set up such that, I think you do that here. Yeah, in the filter channel types, I have it set up so that I will only see instrument tracks here. Whether those be audio, instrument tracks, sampler tracks, MIDI tracks. I don't tend to use MIDI tracks, but just right now in my current situation, but all those will be here. And so you can see if I go back up here and activate this damage instance, if I have a keyboard shortcut that opens each mixer window, I can open that up, and here that is. So only the ones that are activated, as opposed to the whole, giant scroll. I can look at only the ones I'm working with and, mess with the inserts or the volume or whatever, and I can see all of that together. So there's that. The second mixer window is the individual groups, which are going over right now. So I'll talk about those. It would be good to mention this too, probably. So each individual group has sends that go to various things. And I'll talk about this with the drums. So, here, as you can see, so with, I'll get to the effects tracks later on, but I tend to have, for the orchestral groups, for the orchestral libraries, I tend to have each of the individual groups routed to 2 different reverb instances, effects tracks. I have, you'll see the CA. The C stands for convolution reverb, and the A stands for algorithmic reverb. So each one will be routed to a different one. I'll kind of talk more about that in the effects section as to why there are 2. Really just I'll get into that. I'll do an effects breakdown another time. But I like to have the 2 because they both work in different ways and tend to accomplish 2 different things. So having multiple reverbs, certain reverbs have strengths and weaknesses, and I like to combine them to kind of A, increase depth, and B, kind of fully expand out the reverberation of the sound and just kind of heighten it and enhance it. So that's what that is. But as you can see, some of these individual tracks are routed to other places as well. So as you can see, let's talk about the kick drum individual group. That's being sent to a drum parallel. So parallel compression, I'll probably break down kind of how I utilize parallel compression in another video, but I'll have these different tracks, the group tracks going to various parallel tracks So as you can see for here, I have 3 different kinds. Actually, these 2 are mainly parallel. I have a drum parallel, and then I have a drum trash parallel, which is just maybe I'll put more distortion on that, or kind of color that a bit more. And so each of these are going to the drum parallel, the drum trash parallel, and then I have a drum room track. I do have a drum master convolution reverb effects track that these are being sent to as well. It depends on, I don't have that automatically activated as I do with the other orchestral individual groups, because orchestral individual groups are always going to get reverb more than not. And so I will default to having these activated. But the drums, it kind of depends on the arrangement and what type of drums. Maybe it's more of an electronic thing. And maybe they won't get as much reverb. But if I'm wanting to simulate live acoustic drum performances, then in that case I'll kind of turn these on. So it just kind of depends on my need, which is why I don't have them automatically activated. And there's an additional, I've got another reverb, and I also have an instance of reverb I may use on the master drum group, which we'll get to. But I also kind of like to have the drum room parallel track, and I have some disabled effects here, which I realize I didn't mention those before, so I'll kind of talk about those real briefly, but I may want to use some compression on the drum room or whatever. Each of the individual group tracks you'll see up here is, well, no, just kidding, not each of those. So some of them have instances of disabled plugins on here, and the reason for that is I go through the individual, and this is, again, through like developing a process and kind of developing your craft and realizing what you tend to use on certain things. And again, just making life easier for yourself in the future. So if I tend to realize over time, okay, on my, orchestral bass drums, I tend to like to use either, the Puig Tech emulation of the Pultec EQ, or maybe R-Bass, some kind of low-end enhancement. I tend to like to use those. Let me just automatically tee those up, have them disabled so they're not taking up computer resources, but I can quickly activate those if I want to, and then begin adjusting parameters. And there you go. You can even have parameters preset if you want to, and then save presets, and that kind of thing. And to keep organized, I will often save presets. If I have presets for my template that I'm saving, what I'll do is I will copy the name of the track, let's say, and then if I have a setting that I like in the, the Puig Tech, I will save the preset, and I will paste the name of the group track it is for, and then I'll put FX, and then save it as that. And that way, if I, for some reason it is, changed, the preset is different, and I want to find it again, I can just copy this and load one up and search it, and it'll be there. And I put effects, and then other times if there is, maybe like an EQ arrangement that I'll have on here, I will do the same thing, save preset, paste it in there, and then add EQ to the end of it. So yeah, that's what's going on there. And various, another thing about parallel in the template, let me just say, not everything has parallel. You can see orchestral percussion, some of it has parallel, some of these are being sent to parallel. You can see it just tends to be the things that, again, do I tend to like using parallel for those things? Often for percussion or vocals or lead standout or guitar. A lot of these things I will like to have parallel. So the pianos don't have a parallel track set up, but I could very quickly click, down here in the window, duplicate, and create, a parallel track, rename or whatever, and then, begin routing this to that, and then there you go. So I don't have everything routed up that way, but if I want to, I can quickly, I'm set up for success in that I can quickly kind of create parallel tracks if I want to for a particular mix or arrangement, and then go from there. So here we have string individual tracks. Like I said, vocals, solo. I have a solo vocal parallel because I tend to like to use parallel compression on solo vocal. So I'll have those. And then I will have individual tracks for my synthesizers. Lead synth and bass have parallel because I tend to like to use those there. And those automatically have, the compression plugins that I'll like to use, and then some kind of, enhancement maybe if I want to activate those. Synthesizers and hybrid stuff and guitars, pretty much all hybrid stuff, do not, anything non-orchestral does not automatically have reverb set up. And it has it set up, but it's not activated. I can activate it but I won't, typically more often than not, what I'll do is each individual instrument or synthesizer track, or at least a synthesizer group track maybe, will have different reverbs for those different sections. But I tend to use more like, I have one synthesizer track with one kind of reverb and then one with another. Rarely will I just kind of blanket like all the synths, all the lead synths get the same reverb. And I don't tend to do that a lot. Maybe I'll want to do that, which is why I have this set up just in case, and I will say does this work with Sends? So a quick Cubase tip, if you want to select multiple group tracks, then, click one, shift click, select multiple, and then press shift alt. You'll see Q link up here is activated. You can go down here and, select an effect send, and then suddenly all these will be sent there. So you don't have to go one at a time and send all these to the effects tracks that you're wanting necessarily. Definitely would encourage you, whatever DAW you're using, read the manual, study the hell out of it, or study, tutorial videos. I watch a lot of those as well. Anything you can to learn it inside and out and make yourself as fast as possible and efficient is a good idea, in my opinion. Okay, so the third mixer window I have is my master. So we've gone through the individual instrument tracks, and I have everything, the individual group tracks sent to a VCA fader, so that if for whatever reason some of my tracks are kind of hot and they're clipping, I can just drag this. You can see it better here. And I also have it set up so nifty, it's right over here, distinguished from the others. I can drag those down, and it'll only affect the ones that are automatically up in volume. So it's, these are the parallel tracks are as low as they can go, so it doesn't affect those. It also doesn't raise them, which is cool. And then that way I can bring them in at the various levels that I want. But if some individual group tracks are clipping, I can bring those down automatically, and it'll preserve automation, which we talked about earlier. So as you can see, the automation has preserved it, and it visually shows that it's been lowered where it was previously, but it will still automate accordingly. So that's preserved, which is really cool. And then the individual instrument groups feed into the master groups, as I call them, which also have their own VCA faders, same principle. And it's just, they're filtering into larger and larger categories, right? So the individual instrument tracks get sorted accordingly, and then those kind of go into the larger categories, which are the master tracks. I think I just said the same thing twice in basically the same way, so apologies. Okay, so you'll see here I have winds long and short, brass long and short, orchestral percussion, melodic percussion, drum kits, bells and harps, strings, long and short, choir. That's my dog. She is mad about somebody outside, in case you can hear that. Synthesizer stuff, hybrid stuff, etc. These all tend to have more plugins automatically uploaded on them. So let me say first, these don't have the effect sends, because if I want to separate out the effect sends. Let's say so you're trying to set up your session such that you can export things as quickly as possible to give your client what they need for whatever it is you're producing, right? So let's say I send them, the stems of my winds long and winds short section if I have woodwinds in my arrangement, and they go, oh, actually, you know what? We need the piccolo's doing something weird, and we want to adjust that independently of everything else. And we just rather do it than have you do it because maybe you've wrapped up and they're like, oh, we'll just send us the piccolo and flute stemmed out and we'll have that taken care of. Well, if you don't have reverb here but you have it here, it's not going to be, there's going to be the reverb's going to be gone on these particular groups. And then also you're going to, even if you do route them to those effects tracks, is it going to be exactly the same as how it sounded when they were here? You're going to have to disable it here because then if you have it here and here, it's going to be twice as much reverb. So it's easier to just have it on the individual group tracks, and then the reverbs from your effects sense sort of ride the wave, so to speak, or are routed along with the group tracks, and those all kind of feed into the one master track. So that's what's going on there. And so let's look at, strings is kind of a common one. So I have preloaded on these master tracks plugins with settings that I tend to like to use the most in terms of affecting, if you want compression for your strings in general, your string longs. Let's say you're ensemble long strings. Let's say you want compression on those overall. It's way easier to just do a multiband or add an instance of whatever compressor you like on to affect everything, rather than go depending on how many of these individual string groups you're using. Which, by the way, I just did some scrolling here. This is all the individual groups here. In my configurations window, I have groups for each of these. So if I want to just target strings, I can go to configurations, string groups, only string groups. So there's a tip for that. That's instrument, not individual. But you don't want to go to, each individual group and go compressor, compressor, compressor. I mean, you can select, shift select and then, select whatever kind of compressor you want and have that on everything. So there's a tip for that. But it's way easier if there's an effect that sometimes you don't want to apply the same effect to everything, and that's fine. That's why these have individual groups stemmed out so that you can get picky and I want more low end in the bass, so I'm going to put low end enhancement on here and it won't affect any of the others. But if you want to do something for everything overall, have that preloaded on the master track, and then you can kind of cover everything at once, so to speak. And so, again, I'll go into specifics on plugins another time on the particular ones that I have on these, but you can kind of see, maybe you'll recognize some of the names of the plugins I have on here. And these just tend to be plugins that I know I like to use with these particular groups of instruments, strings or brass or whatever. And as you'll see, I mentioned, I have instances of other reverbs on a lot of the orchestral master tracks. So those have those have a lot of reverb. They have the internal reverb from the library, because a lot of those have that. They have the convolution and algorithmic reverb coming from the effects end tracks, and then they have a little bit of reverb on here. You can see I'm not using a lot of this mix, and when I get to the effects tracks, you'll see those are set pretty low. The reverb is actually pretty subtle. It sounds heavy-handed with all that reverb, but it's pretty subtle. When used carefully, it can really help to make your samples sound more natural and imbue them with all this kind of depth that they wouldn't otherwise have. So that's what's going on there. We'll talk in detail about that another time. If I scroll here, you'll see these kind of final delivery tracks, as I refer to them. And each of these are filtering into the corresponding final delivery track. So all of the orchestral long groups, the master groups, the winds long, brass long, strings long, those are all going to the final delivery track. And the reason I have these, this is kind of what I default to. So there are 13 of these, as you can see, and 3 of them aren't even individual groups. One is the 11 is my stereo mix. That's everything. 2 is a click track in case I want to export that. And 13 is a dialogue track in case I want to export that. When you submit things to be put into the edit, or when you finish compositions or sent to the dub mix or whatever, this can be useful for editors just to kind of include a dialogue track to make sure that when they align things with where you said they were supposed to align, or what they default to if you export them, you know, with a, what is it called? A broadcast wave chunk. They'll play, they can mute the dialogue, obviously, but it'll just quickly, they can play back and see, okay, the dialogue lines up. We'd hear it if it wasn't, so everything's syncing up the way they're supposed to. So that's what that's for. And my dialogue track up here in my assets is routed to that, as you can see right there. So that won't be across everything else. It'll go to that particular one. But I like kind of summing things to just this, you know, small. I don't want to give people more stems than they want. And I don't want to overwhelm them with the time. You know, I wouldn't send them all of the individual group, even if, you know, I'm not going to use all of these tracks, presumably, on an arrangement. But even if it was like 20 or 30, sometimes, especially with orchestra, sometimes the arrangements can get pretty hefty. You don't want to send all those to somebody unless they want them. But I kind of have these final delivery tracks so that I can kind of default to these and send these, you know, and everything will go into the one stereo mix, and I'll have these for synchronization purposes or maybe music editing purposes. And there's that. But if someone's like, hey, I want, and this happened to me recently, I had the guitar stem, they said, hey, I want bass guitars and, you know, electric guitars or acoustic guitars stemmed out. Well, cool. I can go to my individual groups and, you know, find my guitars, and I can stem these out instead of all the final delivery stems. So I'm just kind of setting myself up to give myself options for however I want to export things and deliver things depending on the needs of, you know, whoever I'm composing for. So final things, almost done. Final delivery VCA automation. So what I have is everything's going into the final delivery stems, obviously, and then I have these, not the stereo mix, but all the other kind of individual final delivery group stems that go into the stereo mix. I have those on this final delivery automation here. And what I'll do is, as I'm composing, when I submit something for review, I will, like I said earlier, I'll send a video file a lot of the time. And what you're doing when you do that is you're kind of simulating what, you know, the movie would sound like with the score in there for them to watch and review and kind of, you know, have that experience and then give their notes and feedback. And you don't, most likely what you're going to want to do is adjust the sound of your arrangement so that it fits with the audio in the cut. So for example, if you have a part in the film where there's a particularly quiet piece of dialogue and your score is at risk of, you know, being too loud and needs to be balanced again against that and kind of come down a little bit at a particular point, you can automate that down, and there you go. And as you can see, all of the final delivery stems are now automatically following that behavior. But you can also continue to go to the master group stems and automate those if you want everything kind of automated at once, but you want the brass longs doing something independent from everything else, you can still do that as well. And the brass longs will still do their thing independent of everything else, and yet everything else will still follow the overall kind of instruction of the final delivery VCA. And I have that titled auto, just short for automation, just to let me know that that's what that's for, because I have various other VCAs like the master VCA volume and individuals where that's just, like I said earlier, for potential clipping or, you know, just bringing everything down, gain staging, general purposes. But yeah, that's that. The last mixer window, like I said, is the effect sends. And everything is here. Everything automatically starts off as disabled. Again, same reason the tracks are disabled. I may not use all of these. I may be working on a synth score that has no orchestra whatsoever. And so it'd be, you know, lots of plugins activated that I wouldn't need. So I just kind of default to nothing's enabled when I open the session, and then I enable as I go, depending on my needs for the particular cue. But I have, like I said, for most of the orchestral elements, I have a convolution and an algorithmic reverb. And I will also beneath them have a imager, which just kind of works to, if I want to narrow or widen the imaging of the reverb, I can do that. I won't go into too much detail about that, but the orchestra has an automatically set volume, except for the drums, that kind of just defaults to 0. I'll adjust that. And then the hybrid elements, I will, because as I said earlier, I don't always use a master reverb across everything, but if I do, I'll definitely want to kind of customize that. So I will, obviously, if I choose to, bring this up and select a reverb and then choose a level for that. And similar to the individual and master groups, this has my effects have a VCA as well, just in case. Let's say I finish the cue, and then it's an orchestral cue, and as the piece ends, it swells to a giant crescendo and then ends. And then for a nice touch at the end, I want the reverb to kind of come up and be a little more audible as it you know, tails out and fades off. I can do that. I can automate the effects VCAs, and now, as you can see, all of the orchestra anyway. I guess I don't have that set to. Oh no, it's because the synths will do that too. Everything's set to it. It's just because they're set to negative. They don't have a volume set, but everything will kind of follow that. And then, you know, if I want the string longs to kind of do something different, I can automate that as well. So there's that. Last thing I'll briefly mention, the individual group audio output stems. I have audio output stems for my individuals and my masters. These basically just enable me to, so if I wanted to, each one of these corresponds to, so the individual group audio stems obviously correspond to all of my individual group tracks, and the inputs are set to the particular group track that they correspond to. So basically what this would enable me to do is if I had a part and wanted to kind of bounce these in real time, and sort of down mix everything and have all my audio files here for that. You can really do that quite effectively in the audio export menu. But if I wanted to do that here, I could record enable these and then just press play, or record over the cue that I'm doing, and any audio, you know, performed by instruments feeding into the group tracks, which are routed into these output stems, would be here. So I just, again, have that set up in case I need to use those, and those are collapsed because I don't use those. Haven't used those yet, but, you know, have it set up just in case. And then the to be orchestrated, not to be orchestrated, these are folders which I will, so if I need to send something to an orchestrator or somebody who's going to, do orchestration, arrange a piece of music I've mocked up to be played by real players, I will duplicate the entire session, save as, and have a session specifically a version of this cue for the delivery of the MIDI to the orchestrator. And I will sort things in these folders accordingly. But that is it. That's an overall basic tour of my Cubase template for film scoring. And the routing, like I said at the top of the video, there is some information in here that you can take and sort of run with and implement into your system, and will make you more effective and efficient as a result. And also, just to repeat from the beginning, if anybody sees any areas where I can tighten things up, make things quicker and faster and better, feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you have any general questions, feel free to reach out via the comments or email. And thanks for watching.